Hello there, wrestling fans, and welcome to another episode, a very thankful episode of the internationally known Dudes at Ringside podcast as we continue Thankful for Wrestling Month. And tonight we have a gentleman that is a commentator and he does a lot of awesome things. John, welcome to Dudes at Ringside podcast.
Well, first and foremost, Joe, thank you for having me as your guest of honor tonight. It is truly an honor for me. And if you don't mind, I would like to give you a proper introduction.
Sure, go for it.
Ladies and gentlemen, from the corner to my right, with a podcast in his back pocket and a microphone in his hand, he is a generational wrestling star. This is Joe Panther.
Thank you. Oh my god. Dude, thanks. That was so cool. Dude, thank you.
That's why I
Yes.
get paid money.
Yes. That was awesome, dude. Thank you. So, to all my internationally known fans that are not familiar with you, John, and why would they not be, introduce yourself.
Well, my name is John Bullard. I am known as the human Swiss Army knife of pro wrestling. I'm a former professional wrestler, of course, a promoter at times in the Chicagoland area, manager at times way back in the good days, but now mainly I am the voice of professional wrestling in the Midwest for multiple promotions. I'm also the play by play man for Project X Wrestling based out of Ontario, Canada. I am the voice of Arena Budokan and Mexico, the English commentator for the world famous Mexican Arena of over 62 years. I've also have course done play by play commentary for the Spirit 2 Pro Wrestling and the beautiful island of Puerto Rico, and not at least just currently finished up doing English commentary for the debut episode on the premier streaming network for Setup Thailand Pro Wrestling, uh, universally and known for having what they call the golden voice.
Wow. Awesome, man. So, my question for you is how did you get into the wrestling business like in the beginning, like who trained you?
Well, now the way I got into the wrestling business is kind of a comical sort of start, how it all happened. As a child, always loved professional wrestling, which I know that's like the cliche thing everyone hears from every person in the wrestling business. But for me, how I actually got my foot in the door, 11th grade year in high school, I had a English book cracked open, but inside of it in the middle was a PWI 500. And that PWI 500 was like my roadmap to everything I know about professional wrestling at that time. And unbeknownst to me, my school teacher who was walking behind me sees it. And she said to me right before I freaked out, because I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to get this taken from me. She says, huh, well, who's number one for this year? And I looked up, and it was my school teacher at the time, Ms. Diane Struby. Rest in peace to her. She was the one who actually helped get me into professional wrestling because her son was a professional wrestler. Her son was, of course, Big Daddy Rhodes in the state of Florida. And, of course, his business partner at the time when they were running professional wrestling events was a gentleman by the name of Spike Moore. So at a very young age, I started training, started doing all the grunt work, setting up, taking down, do all the things that you should be doing when you first break into the wrestling business. They call it paying dues, of course, but that's how I actually got my start in professional wrestling. Was having a chance. A school teacher and me started talking, and I told her this was my dream. Now, I said this to another teacher beforehand. Back in 8th grade, I had a teacher named Miss Leak, business class. She asked all students, "What do you want to do when you get older?" And of course, I said, "I want to be in professional wrestling." And she looked at me, and the most devastating thing any adult ever said to me was, "That's a silly dream. Not many people will ever make it. I don't think you won't either." Well, like I said, fast forward to 11th grade year, school teacher named Diane Struby. Power of mentors, power of a good teacher versus a bad one. She said to me, "You can do this, but you have to work hard at it. But I believe in you." And when you have someone say, "I believe in you," that's the greatest rocket fuel anyone could ever have in their ship. And yeah, the rest was from there. I Started doing that when I was 17 years old, and started announcing and commentating. And how that fell in place one night. By the time I turned 18 years old, after doing all the ring setup, ring takedowns, paying dues, learning, their commentator for that evening couldn't make the show. And I remember getting the phone call, and I heard, "Hey kid, do you have a suit and tie?" Of course, I have a Sunday outfit for church. I was like, I do have, I have that. Yeah, good. Wear it. Now I'm thinking back in my head, why am I wearing this? All I do is like ring crew work. But I'm like, oh, okay. So I brought it with me, and sure enough, that night, hey, you have a really good voice for. And back then, I had a deep voice as a kid, and they were like, well, we want you to be our commentator for the night and see how you do. And ever since then, I've been, well, talking and involved in professional wrestling in different aspects.
Wow. So, like, as a kid, like, who was like your biggest inspirations, like that are in the wrestling world, or like anywhere, anybody else?
Well, as a commentator, I could definitely look back at the influences I've had as a kid growing up in the South. Gordon Soley, and of course, the dean of wrestling, was like my roadmap for to be a commentator. Definitely to be a professional play by play commentator that does narration like a storyteller. Uh, I watched a lot of Gordon Soley, Lance Russell of Memphis, Tennessee. Love Lance's work. Those two were probably my first big influences next to of course, the other late great legend, Gorilla Monsoon. Anybody watched old school WWF, Monsoon and Bobby Heenan were just magic together. So those guys were all big influences on me. Later in life, Joey Styles from ECW, just the way that he was doing solo commentary, but then he would also throw in like a little color commentary with his play by play work was phenomenal. So those guys were huge influences. But for wrestlers, um, I was like a weird kid growing up. Everybody, all the kids like love Hulk Hogan. I was always like rooting for the villains. I mean,
Mm,
like I love like when Jake Roberts had a heel turn with the Cobra. I thought that was phenomenal. Was always a big fan of Paul Eldering with the Legion of Doom back in the
mm,
days when they were before they were the baby faces. They were just a very like monstrous group of guys. I've always liked the monsters and the villains because I always found those guys more interesting. Great Muda, for example, he had a great Kabuki, and then when Great Muda came onto the scene, it was like the coolest thing in the world. So yeah, those guys were all like some of my favorites. For a manager, I would say Playboy Gary Hart ranks up there as one of the biggest influential characters in my life.
awesome. Like, with like when you first made your debut as a commentator, like, was it harder to just now put the headphones on and call a match, or do you watch the screens like most commentators do, or do you watch the action more?
So back then, a lot of wrestling promotions weren't as fancy to have monitors. So everything literally was you had your microphone set up, you had it feeding through with a video camera, and you would just commentate what you saw. You had your microphone, and you're looking up, and you're watching the action in the ring, and ladies and gentlemen, he's going to the top rope. And what he's going to do now? Hey, he had some with a flying back body drop, elbow drop, whatever type of move was going on. You just narrate it for what it was, and yeah, that's how when I originally started, everything was watching up, watching the action. You're just talking about what's going on. Now the last couple of years, life has been easier as a commentator because now we have like computer monitors up. We have, you know, replay screens that we can turn back and watch different angles of the camera, how that move happened or what was going on. Fight spills into the crowd. The cameraman's like right behind them. You could like watch it from your monitor and commentate over it. So yeah, it's night and day, two different worlds. But for most part, when I first started as a commentator, it was just me, the microphone, looking up at the ring and calling the action.
Mm, awesome. Like, who is your favorite wrestler to call, out of male or female, either or?
Hmm. Well, that's a good question because there's just the last few years alone, there's been so many of them. Oh man, now you ask a really good question that's going to make me think for a few seconds, just because
Because I
there's
know
so
I know
many of
quite a
them.
few Canadian wrestlers. I don't know if you watched some of my past episodes from this past year.
Out of the Canadian wrestlers that
Yeah.
I've had the privilege of commentating, there's this young kid named Magna McLaren.
Mhm.
McLaren is like I think he's now 17 years old,
Oh
and
wow.
well, he's been wrestling since he's 12.
Gee,
So
that's like England. England does that all the time now. That's like
that
I, you would
that
be
that
you'd
kid's
be
amazing.
amazed that like the 9-year-olds that set in the ring in England, and then one day they're 12, and then they're 18, and then boom, look at them. They're like, did
Yeah.
I? Oh my god.
What's so wild is when you see Magnum in person, you think like, okay, this is like a 23-year-old, you know, young man. And you find out like, dude, he's not even old enough to drive a car yet, like fully, like
Jeez.
17 years old, and he looks like he's 24. He's like a grown man already. And to me, he reminds me of Chris Jericho and Triple H,
Oh
like a
wow.
merge together. Oh, dude, he's a blue chip prospect, third generation wrestler. His
So he'd
father
be
was a wrestler.
Y2H.
His grandfather was the original Great Malenko of Canada.
Oh wow.
His grandfather was Bret Hart's favorite wrestler growing up.
Ooh.
So yeah, I mean that young man has big shoes to fill. But
Mm,
Magna McLaren is a superstar right off the bat. When you see this kid, it's like, yep, he's got all the it factors
mm.
to be the guy for a company, and he's phenomenal. Highly suggest everyone to check out Project X Wrestling,
Project
Sudbury,
X.
Ontario, Canada. They have a really good roster, a really good group of men and women that wrestle there. I would also say this too. A lot of the wrestlers from Asia that I have had a privilege of commentating for, there is a wrestler who comes out of Dragon Gate, Japan, named Law Estrella,
Mm.
that is phenomenal high flyer and someone who I think has all the potential to be a breakout star for the rest of the world.
Oh wow. I've had some wrestlers this past year from Canada. I had Sam Kelly.
Hmm.
I had Mary Lee Rose, which was very cool. She's very sweet. Her character is supposed to be like crazy. I can't think of the lady's name right now, but her character's like a punk rocker. She's like short, but she's like a rocker.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. Oh,
Oh, excuse me.
what's her name? Jessica Black.
Okay, I've heard of her. I've heard of Jessica Black.
Yeah, she's awesome, but she doesn't spell her name like Jessica. It's a K in her name. I got reminded once. I don't think I did it the second time she came on, but yeah, there's tons. And I had a kid. Yeah, I had so many Canadian wrestlers kept in after I went like the end of March, started contacting me. So I went and just I was like I didn't know what kind of month to make it. So a whole week, I went from like the Monday to the previous Monday. I just went Canadian wrestlers. I was like, I'm gonna do a Canadian wrestling week. I had Jessica Black, I had Sam Kelly, but she was so nervous, and she's like, that was the most fun. Her English was she spoke French,
Yeah, French
French
Canadian. Yeah,
Canadian. So
yeah.
like pretty much,
We
she's like, you were my first American podcast. You were so sweet to me. Like I was nervous because I didn't know how you were gonna speak all English, and you made it so simple and easy. And so did Marie Lee, Michelle Lee, whatever, Lee Rose, Michelle Lee Rose, and they both were like, "You were so easygoing," and I'm like, I had a grandma that spoke Spanish. I did it like that. You may not be able to speak English that well. I'll speak. I won't make it sound like I'm trying to talk to a baby, but I'll
no,
make it so you understand me. So we are on
of
the same
course.
page. Even though some words I said, she's like, "What?" Michelle, I was like, um, Rose, I was like, okay, and I would say the word a different way, and she's like, oh yeah, I get you, now, I get you. But
No, yeah.
yeah, Canada is like blowing up with superstars. It's like I I I got to get my passport. I told my dad, my parents just got their passports. I'm like, why did I not get my passport? I could have snuck off to Canada and just been a king over there with the podcast game with freaking Canadian wrestlers. Like it's amazing to think.
Oh yeah, the whole scene from Quebec. Actually, I take it back. Not just Quebec. Like you have like the islands out there too. that actually have a really good wrestling scene. Newfoundland actually has a really good wrestling scene, all the way from Newfoundland, from Quebec. Ontario, of course, has a lot of wrestling promotions there that are really top notch. Western Canada, of course, the Albertas will always be a hotbed for pro wrestling. There's a really good wrestling promotion, WPW, out of Winnipeg, Manitoba, that has
Mm.
packed houses every night. And of course, there's CWE, the Canadian Wrestling Elite. They do all the tours to the provinces. So yeah, wrestling in Canada right now is truly a hotbed for the world of professional wrestling, turning out a lot of really good stars.
Like tons. It's almost like I've after the interviews, the wrestlers like, "Oh, do you have any suggestions? Where should I come? Where should I start in America?" And I used to say East Coast, but it costs more to get to the East Coast, and things cost more in the East Coast of America. So I always say start on the West Coast and work your way over. And they're like, "Oh, work your way from like California, then work your way from California, Arizona, then Texas, and then Ohio. See if they need you in Ohio Valley." I interviewed a female wrestler from France, and she, I have to send you who she is. I literally told her you would make it in America. Her character's like a heel, like a pretty, like one of these girls that are characters. They know how to work the heel angle really,
Oh
really,
yeah.
really well. Like she kind of has the French Tiffany Stratton kind of thing going,
Okay.
but she's worth it. I actually just posted about it on the Dudes at Ringside page on Instagram, and I posted her with the new belt, and I messaged her. I said, "How many belts is that now?" Because I looked at all the belts she has on her Insta, and I'm like, "I have 7 titles." I'm like,
Hmm.
don't say that in America. They'll be just going here, just sorry, no, here, no. They'll be throwing belts at her, or they'll be trying to see who she's worth fighting. That's what they do in America, you know.
Nice.
Yeah. So, is there any other place, any promotion that you've been like looking at and watching that you're like, I can go there, like I want to go there, like to commentate?
There's a couple of really good promotions. Right now, currently, my 2024 schedule is like so heavily booked out. Like I'm booked all the way from January all the way through December
Oh
for
wow,
for my yeah, and it's like for multiple companies. So to give a little list of places that people could actually hear my voice, in the state of Wisconsin, I will be, of course, doing shows for We Love Wrestling out of Bempine, Wisconsin. It's a brand new promotion started up by a good guy that's
we love wrestling.
been,
I sound There's one that's on the East Coast too. We love wrestling.
yeah, this one is in Wisconsin. Is ran by Tommy Trainwreck. And it's a really good promotion starting up. We're actually having our debut show next week.
Oh wow.
And
Any
has
names? Any names that I would recognize?
Law Strella from Dragon Gate Japan's going to be on that show. Myron Reed from Major League Wrestling. He's going to be on that. Myron's also been wrestling on AEW. He's been wrestling, of course, on Impact Wrestling too. He's really well known. Davey Vega, he's also been on Impact recently. Those guys are actually the main event. It's Myron Reed versus Davey Vega versus La Estrella of Japan put together. So that's going to be just a dynamite show. And of course, and with We Love Wrestling, he also is going to be featuring a lot of up and coming talent from the Midwest, from all over the Midwest states. And there's going to be some East Coast guys too that will be showing up, and it's going to be really good. But that's the first main event for the very first show coming up. I'm also will be working for Frontline Pro Wrestling. They run multiple shows in multiple parts of the state of Wisconsin and also in Illinois. They have a really good show on the premier streaming network called Crossfire. If anybody have the chance to check that out, please do so. I also work for Squared Circle Megastars. They run about 4 big events a year in the out of the world famous Berwyn Eagles Club in Berwyn, Illinois. So I do their play-by-play commentary. I also work currently for other promotions outside of the United States, like Project X Wrestling. With Mexico, I am the English commentator for Arena Azteca Budokan, very famous arena that's been around for 62 years, ran by the Marino Wrestling Dynasty. And that's including El Oriental, his sisters, Cynthia Marino, Susie, and also the most interesting about the Marino family, they're also related to Dr. Wagner Jr. and his son, of course, El Hijo Dr. Wagner Jr. So that's like Mexican wrestling royalty that I get the chance to work for. Also, I do work with the folks at DTU in Mexico here and there, but mainly it's Arena Budokan that I do all the shows for. And what I mean by Arena Budokan, I'm not talking about just like the Marino family, like whatever event comes into that arena, it's my job to do commentary for.
Oh wow.
So I do more than just one promotion. It's almost like a weekly show, weekly gigs that I get, and that can range from the Marino Dynasty shows that is like the mainstay. Then there's the other independent promotions that will come into their arena, and then when AAA comes in to do the AAA shows at Arena Budokan, I'm the one doing AAA commentary for Arena Budokan.
Oh
I
wow.
also over in Thailand just recently I've started doing English commentary for Setup Pro Wrestling out of Thailand. I'm the only English commentator uh, and the only promotion in the country of Thailand. So it's kind of cool to think like I became like the voice of wrestling for an entire country. So it's kind of a really cool vibe I get from that. But yeah, I've been working for all those promotions, and yeah, there's a couple of places I would like to dip my toes in the water and see how it would work. Would love to do the NWA. Really a big fan of what Billy Corgan's doing with the promotion
He's doing
now.
a great thing over there, man. He's
Yeah,
doing
man,
great.
he's turned it around. He's really turned things around for it, and now his plans over the years is starting to build up to what he's been doing. It's pandemic hit him pretty hard, like it did any promoter. So now he's showing the people like, okay, this is what these plans were for, what we're building up to. NWA would be fun. I've recently did some work with Impact Wrestling. For people who've actually are familiar with Joe Hendry, myself and my beautiful wife, we were actually part of one of his segments on Impact Wrestling that aired on Access TV and Impact Plus, and that was just crazy to be on worldwide television like that as a character. But yeah, we got the chance to work with Joe Hendry, and Joe's just a sweetheart, nice guy. So getting the chance to work with him was a real pleasure. And Impact Wrestling's a great company, and now they're going to be known as TNA. So it's good
Mhm.
to see him coming back to being TNA Pro Wrestling. So I'm
Awesome.
excited to see that. Uh, yeah, like to get a chance to work full time for Impact or NWA would be great. MLW would be real fun too. I think Major League Wrestling has a really good product. My style of play by play commentary is very sports based, more than it would be just being a character. So for me, doing more of a sports based style, working for a promotion that takes wrestling seriously, it goes hand in hand. So that's those are places I would like to work for. Everybody would like to go work for WWE, and I
Mhm.
actually have a lot of friends who do work for that promotion. Would I like that? Sure, but I don't know if being on the road that much would be something I would actually really enjoy. I'm kind of like I like to have my own set schedule where like okay, I can go here and work these places, take some time off, go do some other projects. So to me, like NWA would be perfect because NWA, they give you the like, show up for these tapings and then you have like the rest of the month off or rest of whatever's going on. So yeah.
In closing of this awesome interview, John, with it being Thankful for Wrestling Month, what are you most thankful for in the wrestling business?
I'm thankful for everyone who supports wrestling. In all honesty, when 2020 came about, we got hit by this pandemic, and there were so many wrestling promotions that were closing doors. A lot of companies didn't know they'll ever come back. Well, let's be honest, we didn't even know like we would ever run a show again because we literally felt like the world was closing up. I'm excited and always happy to meet fans. Always excited to meet people like yourself who contributes to the world of wrestling with your podcast shows. I'm thankful for everyone who just loves this crazy business. I love the people who enjoys the bright lights and the entertainment and what everyone brings to the table to give people a chance on a nightly basis, definitely on those Saturday nights, that you can go out, buy a ticket, forget about your problem for 2 to 3 hours, and you could just enjoy the world of wrestling the way that it is. So to me, it's always first and foremost a huge thank you to the fans. If without them, there wouldn't be us.
Awesome. So, if my fans want to like find you anywhere on the YouTube in the YouTube box or like on
Yes.
another website, where
You
can
can
they find you on social media? I mean, like that.
on YouTube. Actually, you could look me up as John Bullard commentator. I actually have my own commentator page where I do post up some individual matches I have done for different companies. So check that out. I'm on Facebook as well. Look up John Bullard. You can't miss me with the way I look. You'll see it a mile away. So hey, check that out. So those are my two main things. Instagram. Uh, Let me get my phone out here.
Yeah.
You're making me actually look up all these accounts. This is why like I need to hire a social media team. Uh, so uh, on Instagram, Big Fight Bullard, Bullard, Big Fight Bullard is my Instagram account for all my ring announcing and also play-by-play commentary. Those are the three main things to find me on. And I'm not really a big Twitter guy. That's
Yeah.
more my brother-in-law that does that. I'm more of a Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube guy.
Yeah. Me too. I think Twitter's kind of a scary place. I had Twitter and then I just shut it off because I was like tired of seeing stuff, and I'm like, okay, I'm out of here. I just signed out and walked away. Again, I did it for 2 times. Boop, gone. All right, John, I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's makes me smile to know I have more podcast friends in the world now. So
Hey, you know what? It's always good to make a new friend. So,
yeah,
Joe, thank you for being my friend, as they would say in the wonderful world of Golden Girls. Thank
yes.
you for being my friend. So, I appreciate it.
I'm Joe Panther the third. Your turn,
Dudes at Ringside Podcasts.
and we will catch you in the next one. Good night, everybody.